I'm your host, Scott Burnstein, back with a vengeance to finish 2025 strong here at the OG Pod. We're going to go back to the well to, re-energize us and get us moving back into the fall of 2025. Took about 2 months off, so I appreciate you guys sticking with the program and patiently waiting for me to return. Had some family things, some mental health things, some physical health things that I had to take care of, but rejuvenated, refreshed, and we're going up to the Great White North to give us some exclusive reporting on the Rizzuto crime family. Last time we discussed them, things are quite perilous, honestly. Most of the leadership of the Rizzuto mob is behind bars right now, stemming from a June gangsterism and murder case that dropped, took down most of the shot callers. So we reported about a making ceremony and a kind of State of the Union meeting that took place in the weeks after the bust. And now, exclusively, I have for the audience who is running the show day to day for the Rizzutos on the street. It's not a name. It's a name that people will recognize as a lawyer, honestly, kind of like Leo Rizzuto was an attorney. The new street boss of the Rizzuto mob is disbarred attorney Loris Cavalieri, who had been a kind of in-house counsel for the Rizzutos, as well as members of the Hells Angels and other members of street gangs for years and years. Was somebody that was on the radar of law enforcement. They were never able to nail him until the 2010s. He went down with Leo Rizzuto and Little Sauce Solicito. Those guys beat the case because of attorney-client privilege issues. Ironically, Cavalieri ended up having to swallow about a year or two in prison, kept his mouth shut, lost his license. And now I'm told he is the guy that is replaced Baldy Barbario as the street boss. He is relaying all of the orders, all of the edicts, all of the messages for Leo Rizzuto and Pietro Diadamo, a.k.a. Black Pete, the underboss. Stefano Solicito, Little Sauce, is, fighting for his life, honestly. And it has nothing to do with the case that he's facing right now. It has to do with a cancer diagnosis. And he's not in the best of shape, trying to get out from behind bars so he can get better medical aid on the outside before they go to trial. I'm told the trial will be in a couple months. They wanted it this fall. Now it's looking like it's going to push into the winter. Things happen faster in Canada than they do in the United States. A racketeering case in the U.S. could take 2-3 years to get to trial. This thing's going to get to trial within the year, max, maybe within 6 months. But Cavalieri is a guy, again, it's a name that I'm sure people in Canada recognize, a high-profile attorney before he got disbarred. According to the 2016 or 2017 indictment, which he was included in with Rizzuto, Leo Rizzuto, who's, we also, these were two like-minded individuals, guys that were highly educated, had, professional legal backgrounds, great minds for strategy and diplomacy, according to the court case and indictments and other SQ and RCMP intelligence files. Cavalieri was a guy, even before he took this role in the Mafia, he was somebody that, from an outside perspective, really helped the Rizzuto mob and the Hells Angels navigate a lot of the pitfalls in the justice system. It was alleged that his office in Saint Leonard was used as a meeting spot for mob sit-downs, meetings between different factions of the underworld. Cavalieri was somebody that was juiced in via his clients to multiple spaces in the underworld: Italians, Irish, bikers, some of the ethnic street gangs. I know what they proved, although it didn't nail Leo and Little Sauce, who were having meetings with some pretty incriminating conversations, and because of attorney-client privilege, those recordings were thrown out of court, and Leo Rizzuto and Little Sauce walked from that case. Cavalieri ended up pleading guilty to it, and this was somebody that was very trusted before he joined the ranks of the Mafia, and now he's even more trusted. So we're going to get into kind of the granulars about how he went from the in-house counsel for the Rizzuto mob to being the alleged new Rizzuto mob street boss right now. His wife's clothing store, which I guess was in the same building as his law office, was also used for meetings and sit-downs. So this was a guy that was very, very trusted, and now his importance went from kind of on the periphery, as in terms of he was important regarding keeping these guys out of prison and fighting the crown from a legal perspective. But now, according to my sources, he is a fully inducted member of the Rizzuto mob, and was immediately after his induction promoted from just a soldier to street boss. I'm told that, and my sourcing on this is really good. I'm getting it from the street as well as law enforcement, and this is what the prevailing opinion is for guys in the SQ, guys in the RCMP that are tracking the Rizzuto mob, with the majority of the hierarchy behind bars. And guys on the street are telling me that this was the move. This was something that has been a game changer and prevented what could have been a full-on dismantling, disrupting. It could have been a death knell for the Rizzutos, with so many people off the street at a time where there's so much chaos, uncertainty, and whatnot. Obviously, if you've been following the pod, if you've been following what's been going on in Canada the last decade and a half, but more specifically the last couple of years, with the Rizzutos and the issues with the Hells Angels. I'm also told that Rizzuto Cavalieri was integral in getting the Hells Angels and the Rizzutos back on the same page. That it was, we've been talking about Pete D'Adamo being the driving force behind that peace treaty, but aiding Pete D'Adamo before he got his button was Rizzuto Cavalieri. And I'm told that the meeting and the makeshift FaceTime making ceremony that took place in June was arranged by Rizzuto Cavalieri, and took place, I'm told, possibly at his residence. And I'm told that he was a part of the induction ceremony. And then, as I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, was immediately introduced by Leo Rizzuto and Pete D'Adamo as the guy that will be the top dog on the street. And we had also spoken about in the direct aftermath of the bust, and then the the top secret meeting and induction ceremony that Leo Rizzuto and Pete D'Adamo told everyone, we got this. We're gonna still run the show from incarceration, and we're gonna empower people that we are inducting to be that Rock of Gibraltar, be that stabilizing influence that you might not have on a normal basis when all the main shot callers are taken off the street. There were so many possibilities here because of the instability that has been just an undeniable force on the street the last handful of years. I know it's become cliche to say, but I'll say it again, guys that are your best friend on Monday or an ally on Monday could be your enemy by Tuesday or Wednesday. And then by Friday, they could be back in your camp as an ally. So just so many moving parts here and changing allegiances. I think a lot of people saw when this bus came down in June, there was the potentiality of the sharks start circling. They smell blood in the water. And Leo Rizzuto, again, I don't think we gave him justice when we first started covering him here at the OG Pod and on our companion web magazine, the Gangster Report. This guy was really not given his due in terms of his ability to captain a ship and to steward his father's Mafia dynasty into the future. And myself and others, predicted that he'd be dead by now. But he might be in prison. He might be fighting a case. But everything that I've heard and all my sourcing says that he has a firm grip right now on the Rizzuto crime family, the Montreal Mafia, and Luis Cavalieri is been an instrument for him to instill a level of stability that maybe flies in the face of what you would expect. And I didn't really know a lot about Luis Cavalieri before I heard this. I knew that he was an attorney. I was shocked to kind of learn that the role that he's playing, the trust that he has from Leo Rizzuto and Pete D'Adamo. But make no mistake about it, right now, the Rizzuto Mafia dynasty, the Montreal Mafia, everything is running through Cavalieri right now. And desperate times calls for desperate measures. This was a guy that wasn't an inducted member of the crime family until a couple months ago. And now, he's at least temporarily, he's on the throne. He didn't really have a ton of options with the underboss being locked up, the boss being locked up, the street boss being locked up. We were speculating that Compare Frank Arcadi and his right-hand man, Mini-Me Canestraro, might slide back in there and save the day. But that didn't happen. Compare Frank, the last standing member of Vito Rizzuto, Leo's dad, the last member of his inner circle, really standing right now. And he still has power and sway, but he didn't want that top seat, we're told. And which led us to even more speculation. And then we were told that there were people at that meeting and in that iPhone making ceremony back in the end of June, which we're told was convened by Luis Cavalieri and conducted or overseen by Leo Rizzuto and Pete D'Adamo from behind, from prison, zooming in, for lack of a better term. And we were told that there were guys that weren't Italian that were at that meeting. which tells you a number of things, and that possibly people that weren't of Italian or Sicilian heritage got inducted. And we had heard over the years rumors, speculation, wiretaps of guys that weren't Italian intercepted on these wires talking about how they were made members of the Rizzuto crime family. Joe Bravo, Reynard Desjardins. And I think what I'm hearing, lends credence to the fact that, there had been a precedent set, very possibly by Vito Rizzuto, by bringing in guys that wouldn't normally be able to get a button because they don't have that Sicilian or Italian heritage. But, I tell people over the last handful of months that want to discuss this, and they talk about how out of the realm of possibility that this whole thing, making guys on an iPhone, bringing guys that don't have that traditional pedigree, into the Borgata, how, it's not possible or they don't see it. And I have to explain to them, this isn't LCN, guys. This is not La Cosa Nostra. This is its own entity outside of La Cosa Nostra. Now, the Rizzuto mob, as everybody that follows, the machinations of the Mafia over the last, handful of decades, know that the Rizzutos did start as a offshoot of the Bonannos, the Bonanno mob in New York. So they were at one time affiliated with LCN or part of LCN. But for the last quarter century, they've been their own, it's their ball game, and they can set the rules the way that they see fit. So, and it's worked in the sense that this is a organization that really shouldn't be standing right now. It should have crumbled by now. But Vito Rizzuto blueprinted it, and seeded it, and created the guardrails that allowed it to be durable, to sustain a type of onslaught, both from a enemy perspective, from a legal perspective, enemies from within the Borgata, from without, outside the Borgata group, crews that had been allies that became enemies, have sustained it. And Leo Rizzuto, who I've likened to Michael Corleone, I think some people thought maybe he was afraid of Corleone, but he's Michael Corleone. He's like Michael and Sonny almost, combined. And again, we didn't give him his due. Very polished, a guy that wasn't at all destined for this, the life of a mafia don, if all things would have been even and things would have gone the way his dad had anticipated them to. But this guy's whole family got taken out by these ongoing wars, and he stepped up to the plate and has shown that he is formidable as a mafia don, as a leader. And, him, Pete D'Adamo, and Luis Cavalieri, what they've done in the last year has saved the crime family. 2 years ago, it looked like by the end of 2025, the Rizzuto mob was going to be absorbed by the Hells Angels and become a wing of a 1% group. That didn't happen. D'Adamo and Cavalieri were able to get everybody, in 81 Nation back to the table with the, the powers that be, Leo Rizzuto, Pete D'Adamo, at that historic sit down at the Emma last December. and they're in tandem again and working in conjunction again, and it's, they're a well-oiled machine. And the crime family itself, 4 months removed from the bust, from what I'm told, hasn't lost a step, and that's because of what we're talking here. And I guess Luis Cavalieri went from somebody that I don't think anybody had on the chessboard, and now he's a king. He's been given a crown, or at least to hold temporarily. So I think the last thing I'll say, and we're going to do a deeper dive with our boots on the ground in Canada, Ken Pereira. That will be a longer video and a longer pod that will be released in the next week or two. I think one of the things that Cavalieri brings is, the diplomacy factor. He wasn't just in-house for the Rizzutos, and he was, but it was more than that. He has relationships with, shot callers that run the gamut in the Quebec organized crime world. But specifically, he's very close connected to guys in the ethnic street gang world, which is where it appears the Rizzuto mob is most, I don't know, vulnerable is the right word, but you got Tupac and his Rat Pack mob still on the attack, coming after the Rizzutos. And this is another example of a guy that was in the Rizzuto camp. Then he was in the Hells Angels camp. And they came back to the Rizzuto camp, and now is opposed to them as a rival again. But Cavalieri was somebody that had represented K Crew guys, Jean, the Butcher, those guys that came from the Greg Woolley camp. These were guys that Cavalieri knows, very, very well. And are guys that I think trust him. And when you have a lot of these street gang figures, whether it be Jean-Philippe Celestine, who's now with the Hells Angels, so it's not like they got to worry about him, but people of his ilk, guys like the Rat Pack, Arab Mob, or I should say Arab Power, AWA, which is an offshoot of Arab Power. I think Cavalieri really fits the bill for somebody who can get on their level and talk to them, and a guy that they respect, because he kept a lot of these guys out of jail, out of prison. So it's unconventional. I don't think me or maybe anybody else would have predicted back in the spring or any time that we've been talking about all of this, all these power shifts, that a lawyer, a disbarred lawyer, but somebody with but substantially more of a professional background than a gangster background would be at the controls in the driver's seat and cruising along. I would have never predicted this. And so that's the exclusive that we have. Luis Cavalieri is running the Rizzuto mob on a day-to-day, in communication with Leo Rizzuto and Pete Diadamo and Baldi Barbario from behind bars. And he's the one, he's the straw that stirs the drink right now. You never know where, what's in the future. This might be temporary. This might be for the long term. We don't know, but we'll be keeping tabs on it and giving you everything that we know about what's going on with this trial, what's going on with the Rizzutos. It looks like Little Sauce Solicito will not be released. As of, he's not getting a ton of grace or mercy from the Crown. And he's not in good shape. If you can just see pictures of him in the mainstream media, being wheeled in and out of court or in and out of lockup. He's frail. He's, I'm not a doctor. I don't want to give a diagnosis, but it appears that he's dying from cancer in real time and that he might not make it through the trial. So, we were the first to report that Pete D'Adamo had replaced him. And, at that point, I didn't think it was appropriate to get into the how serious little Sauce Solicito's health problems were. His brother, Baby Sauce, still on the run, hasn't been caught. Took off in that June bust and is still in the wind. So we'll be keeping you updated with what happens with Baby Sauce. There's still, I think, 2 or 3 guys that haven't been apprehended, but we're happy to be back, and we'll be bringing you more content on a more consistent basis going forward to the end of 2025. I'm Scott Burnstein, Original Gangsters Podcast. I'm out.